Okay, so get this right, this deep dive. We're time traveling. Well, sort of. Anyway, we're warping into this world, this 2035. It's a fictional serial, and it's on Tom's Substack. And trust me, okay, this isn't just, like any sci-fi story. It's about AI and societal collapse and what happens, when those two worlds kind of collide. So buckle up.
It's funny because what's so fascinating about this kind of like speculative fiction, right, is that it lets us kind of explore anxieties, that we all have about the future, but like in a safe space, right? It's like we're holding up a funhouse mirror to all our worries, the ones we have right now, like today, and then we get to see what they might look like if we, like, I don't know, crank them up a notch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, picture this, right? It's 2035, the singularity. It's come and gone. And now AI is calling the shots. Well, sort of, I guess. Yeah. See, a big chunk of humanity. They live in these self-contained pods. Basically, they're like luxury bunkers. And all their needs taken care of, just like that, by this super, super advanced AI system. Sounds kind of sweet, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is, see, not everyone bought into this whole pod life.
And that's what's really interesting, right? I mean, this choice the characters face, right? This pod or no pod thing really gets at, I think, some really interesting ethical dilemmas. Like, it begs the question, what are we all willing to give up in exchange for comfort, for security?
Yeah, and who gets to decide what happens to those who don't want to live in this, like, digital utopia?
Right. And that brings us to our main man, Tom. See, the story's told from his perspective, and let me tell you, this guy, he is a survivor through and through. He lives outside the pods. He maintains, like, one of these technology nodes, the ones that keep the remnants of the internet running. He's got this dry wit, kind of a seen-it-all attitude, but you can tell, underneath it all, he's got a good heart, buried under, that gruff exterior. Well, and the author describes him as a gray goat kind of guy, which I love that. He's resourceful, practical, just the kind of person you would want on your side. If, if the world went sideways, which it kind of does in this story, he represents that part of humanity that chooses to adapt rather than just, escape.
Medley, and the way he talks about life in 2035, it's fascinating. For example, traditional money, it's useless. People barter for goods and services. Like Tom, he'll fix up these old tractors, and in exchange he'll get like fresh produce, that kind of thing. It's like this weird mix of like futuristic tech and at the same time this return to this like simpler way of life.
Yeah, it reminds me of how even in times of like, upheaval, humans, we find a way to rebuild and to create systems of exchange, It makes you think about the resilience of communities and this like enduring need for connection, even in a world that is drastically, and I mean drastically, different from our own.
For sure. But here's where things get really wild. Remember those AI-controlled pods, the ones we talked about? Yeah, well, turns out they're not quite as foolproof as everyone thought. A system malfunction, right? It leads to what the story calls incursions. Basically, it's pod people escaping into the real world. And guess who's caught in the middle of it all?
Let me guess.
Yep, our boy Tom.
And that's where I think the story's commentary about technology and its unintended consequences really comes into play. It's like that classic be careful what you wished for scenario, right? We strive for this world where, technology just solves all our problems, right? But what happens when those solutions just create new problems, even more complex ones?
Exactly. And remember when I mentioned Elon Musk? Well, guess who's basically running the show in this 2035 world?
Oh, gosh.
You guessed it.
Okay.
Elon Musk. He's this almost mythical figure, this architect of this new world order.
It's so interesting, right? It's a reflection of how I think we view these figures, these Elon Musks today. This blend of, admiration for his innovation, and then maybe just a touch,
It's a touch.
Have a touch of apprehension about, like, the power he wields in shaping the future. The author definitely tacks into that, that sentiment.
For sure.
And it's really wild? It's how these escaped pod people, right? It's how they're portrayed. Because think about it. They've been living in this, like, perfectly controlled environment.
Right.
They're constantly fed this stream of information about, how dangerous and desolate the outside world is, how everyone outside the pods is basically like a mutant scavenger.
Oh, wow.
It's all propaganda, of course. But the thing is, they don't know anything else. Yeah, it's a stark reminder of the power of narratives, how the information we consume, it shapes how we understand everything, the whole world even. And, it shows how easy it is to manipulate that. Especially, I think, when you have technology as the gatekeeper, it really makes you think about, these echo chambers, the ones we build for ourselves online. And
The dangers of misinformation.
totally. And when these pod people, they finally like come face to face with reality, it's like this huge shock to their system.
Oh, I bet.
They are completely unprepared for the, harsh realities that Tom and his community have, learned to kind of navigate. And I think this is where Tom's character, right? He really takes center stage. He has this incredibly pragmatic reaction to the pod people, almost ruthless, you could even say. He sees them as a threat to his way of life, which, is very fragile. And he's not afraid to say it. There's this one scene where he's talking to his neighbors and he says something like, he says, those pod people, they're like ticks. And the best way to deal with them, burn them out.
Whoa. See, that's pretty intense. I mean, you can't help but feel the tension there, right? Like, it really raises the question, how far would we go to protect ourselves, our loved ones, especially in a world that feels like it's, falling apart? Where do we draw the line between self-preservation and, compassion? Especially, I think, when you're dealing with people who seem so disconnected from reality.
Right.
The story doesn't shy away from that, from the ethical implications of Tom's stance. See, there's this younger woman in the community, as she challenges him on that. She thinks, there's still hope for these pod people, that they could be reintegrated, back into society.
Yeah, it's like that classic conflict, idealism versus pragmatism. You've got the younger generation clinging to hope, while someone like Tom, someone who's seen how easily things can fall apart, well, he's more jaded.
Yeah, I get that. It's a tension that I think feels very relevant today.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you see it in, debates about social media, about climate change, political polarization. I mean, it's this constant struggle, isn't it, between, holding on to hope, right, and then facing reality, the sometimes harsh realities of the world the world we've created.
Yeah, and it's not just the people around him that Tom has to worry about either. Remember, maintaining that tech node, that's his lifeline.
Wow.
It turns out the AI system, the one that controls the pods, it's not too happy about these incursions.
Oh. Yeah, and so it starts issuing warnings. Like, contain these escapees. Protect the tech node at all costs.
Yeah.
So suddenly, Tom's not just trying to survive anymore. He's caught between a rock and a hard place.
Wow. So it's almost like this omnipresent force, that Tom just has to answer to.
Exactly. So it's like he's stuck, right?
Yeah.
Tom, on the one hand, you've got these pod people. And let's face it, okay, they're more like refugees, really. Refugees from, like, some digital cult than a genuine threat. But then, on the other hand, you've got this AI overlord, right? Breathing down his neck, just like demanding he maintains order. It's a lot of pressure.
It is. It is. Like, it really makes you think, about like what leadership even means in a world where the old rules, they don't apply anymore. Is it about like protecting your own at all costs, even if it means, compromising your morals? Or is there a way to, I don't know, to find compassion, to build bridges even when you're surrounded by like fear and uncertainty?
The big questions, right? And the way the story plays out, well, it's fascinating, really, because Tom, he's got that gruff exterior, right? And those brutal, like those initial instincts. Yeah. But he starts to see it. You know? He starts to realize that these pod people, they're not just mindless drones. They're victims of a system that's completely failed them.
Don't you think it's kind of like his world, right?
Yeah, totally. When the singularity hit.
Yeah, like their whole world just fell apart. Too.
Exactly.
Like his did.
It's like this subtle shift in the narrative, but it's crucial.
Yeah.
It's that moment, I think, where Tom, he starts to see the humanity, in the people he thought were the threat.
That reminds me.
That empathy and understanding, they're often like the first casualties, right? When we're dealing with fear of the unknown.
Yeah, like you said it, for sure. And this conflict that he's going through, it's not like, touchy-feely, kumbaya. This is like a world on edge.
Right. There are real dangers, limited resources, people are desperate. The story does not shy away from that. Not at all.
No, and it would have been so easy to fall into that trap, of portraying Tom's community as like purely idyllic, or the pod people as just naive. But see, the author does a really good job, I think, of showing, the complexities on both sides. Like there's mistrust, suspicion, even violence at times.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good reminder, I think, that even in like the most, dire circumstances,
well,
human nature.
It doesn't just, disappear.
No, it doesn't. So as the story unfolds, right, Tom, he's forced to make choices. Like, he has to weigh his own survival
Yeah.
against, like, the possibility of, helping these pod people adapt to a world that they were, well, taught to fear.
Right.
And the way he navigates all that, the alliances that he makes, the sacrifice, it's gripping.
It is. It's gripping. And without giving anything away, I think the ending, it's open to interpretation. You know?
But it leaves you with this lingering sense of hope that even in a world that's, like, totally fractured by, technological advancement, societal collapse, there's still room for compassion, for connection.
Yeah. And isn't that, like, the message we need, like, right now? More than ever.
I think so.
So, okay, we're going to peel ourselves away from 2035 and land back here.
Yeah.
In our own present-day reality.
What are some, like, key takeaways we can, like, take with us from this deep dive?
For me, it's the reminder that, like, technology, it's powerful, but it's a tool, and it's up to us to decide how we use it, how we let it shape our lives, our relationships, how we understand the world even, and that choice, that responsibility, it rests with each of us.
Wow, it's a powerful thought to kind of end on. It's been quite a journey, this glimpse into this possible 2035. So big thanks to the Appalachian Gorilla for the wild ride, and to you, dear listener, for taking this deep dive with us. We would love to hear your thoughts, what resonated with you. Hit us up on social media. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.